What I'm about to share with you is probably one of the most important phases of pursuing your vocation, pursuing your calling, pursuing what your soul truly desires you to bring forth in the world via what your career path is. And it's this phase that is after the phase of introspection, which is action. And my name is Joe Hewley. I'm a philosopher. I'm deeply obsessed and all about vocations, career paths, knowing what your true purpose in this life is, and then pursuing it with conviction in the world. And that's why I'm here on places like YouTube, Instagram, Substack. I host a podcast called the Career Archetypes Podcast. And I have this unearthed membership where I show members how to know the right career path with conviction by unearthing their very own specific career archetype. And the reason I do this is because I believe that every single person in this world has a calling and that it is real and possible to be able to pursue it in the 21st century. It's just a matter of knowing what your calling is and then how to find it. And so that's what I help people to do. And once people know what their calling is and they have all the pieces together, there's a second phase that happens and occurs where people need to take action. And so this second phase of action comes after the very first phase, which is all about introspection. It's about mapping the interior landscape. If you're interested in that idea, you can definitely just search my past work and look for the introspective phase. But this phase of action, where there's a transition from going deep within and getting to the core base of what your calling is, transitions you to this phase of, okay, now that you know what it is, let's bring it out. Let's start walking the path. Let's start going into the world. Let's start moving forward. And this is one of the transitionary phases where a lot of people can lose the connection with their calling and end up reverting back internally. And the reason for this is because sometimes they found the introspective phase to be more within the world of their own personal nature. Maybe they are introverted, maybe they are deeply reflective, maybe they are just somebody that likes to self-analyze. And so they were able to understand what their calling was. And then there is a shift where it says, okay, now it's time to come out into the world. And they're not used to that. They're not used to going out there and doing the work required in the world, in public view, so that they can begin to move their vocation forward. Now, something to remember is that your vocation is public. It's in the public domain. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be somebody that's on camera, like I am. It doesn't mean you need to be somebody that has to be one of these like influencers or anything like that. What it means is that there needs to be some sort of other connected to your work. Someone else has to take it in. And this happens in really every single profession, even professions where there are craftsmen within bigger organizations that might feel as though they're hidden from the person at the end, but they still have typically a team or someone that they're connected to that's going to see their work. And so this seeing the work is really important because when it comes to moving your vocation forward, taking action is the way to bring your work forward, to have it seen. And if you don't take action in the right ways, what that can mean, or maybe you don't even take it at all, what that can mean is that you don't get the recognition that you actually should be getting if you had gone ahead and started to move things forward. Now, action has this fiery temperament, right? And you can think about a fire in a fireplace and imagine being in that room. Imagine that the fire in the fireplace is raging and you're in that room. You would feel the heat, right? It would start to get a bit sweaty. You might throw in a couple more logs and it starts to get really sweaty. So you like take off some layers and the room would just heat up. And this is like a great way to think about action. It's because the fire exudes heat. It's not pulling heat in. It's not contracting it so that the entire room starts to get cold. It's pushing that heat out. And you too will need to push out the work. Now, it doesn't need to be like always this hard effortful thing, but oftentimes in the beginning, if you're not used to going out there and expressing or putting your work out into the spotlight, it will feel like you have to push it out because you haven't yet cultivated that side of yourself that initially can bring it forward. A great way to think about action in another sort of viewpoint is through the viewpoint of an astrological lens. So let's say that we're thinking about the planet Mars, which is also very fiery. It's also associated with action and going forward. There's this forging quality to it. Now, Mars is typically associated with the blacksmith, and the blacksmith will typically be seen smashing iron with a hammer in order to mold things into place. And so this quality that is within all of us, the ability to go out there and forge our way forward, is so necessary when it comes to pursuing the path, because how else is it going to happen? Now, one thing that I want to mention is that there are people that are very, very dominant on the action side, and they're just going out there and they're doing it and they're doing it and they're doing it, and they get very, very far, but oftentimes they're not connected to their soul. And so they're going very, very far, but it's going in a direction that isn't really the real direction for them. It's probably misaligned, and there's this lack of congruency. Whereas people that have done that inner work, if they can cultivate that action piece, they're able to walk their soul's calling out in the world without having to worry, am I aligned or not? They end up doing the good and pursuing the call in the way that it was meant to be pursued. And so you want to get a bit of a touch point for yourself. Do I take enough action out in the world? What is my balance? Because sometimes people will have, I took a little bit of action. It's like I did a lot of reflection. It's like, okay, we need more action, a little bit less reflection. We need to balance this out because there's too much on one side. And when it comes to you going out into the world and pursuing your calling, there will be different action tasks that will feel like blocks. So let's say, for example, that you had to go and connect with an organization that you're like, my values are really aligned, and I really could see myself working for that organization. And all I need to do is I need to send out an email to somebody that works there, and maybe just have a sit down and have a coffee with them and just talk to them about what their experience is. How did you get into this environment? How did you get this job? Did you know that you wanted to work for this organization? And what is it like inside the organization? Because this is what I think it looks like. What do you think it looks like? And suddenly you're having a conversation with somebody that's going to give you a better idea of what it is that you're about to step into. Now, the action there might be sending that email to someone. And being somebody that isn't really used to action, you might just pull back and be like, I don't know if I want to email. Instead, I'm going to do a little bit more research. I'm going to do a little bit more thinking. I'm going to do a little bit more analyzing. And you start pushing into this introspective stage or phase that you're meant to be moving out of. Now, it doesn't mean that you are never going to go deeper into yourself and you're never going to find more within yourself that's going to help you to walk the path. What it does mean is that there needs to be a lot more of this activity out in the world that needs to happen once you actually know the calling. And it's quite of a stark contrast to have to go out there. So say, for example, you knew what your calling was. Let's say that you had the career archetype of the Oracle and you knew that you wanted to start sharing your message on a social media platform. Let's say you wanted to share your message on Instagram, and you have and you know that you wanted to share videos of yourself speaking online. And so there is this action component to it where you have to get in front of the camera, record a video, and go onto social media and then post that video out there. Or maybe you do it on your phone, whatever it is. But there is an activity element. You're not really having to reflect on yourself. You're not really having to reflect on the situation very much. It's more about the action of it all. And then later on, let's say you've done 20 videos and posted them. Maybe then you start to reflect and say, how did that go? What did I like? What did I not like? But then you go again, right? So the action is magnified during this phase and the reflection starts to shrink. So you only reflect a little bit because you need a lot of action to get the proper feedback in order to actually continue moving forward and continue to feed that momentum and continue to progress in that way. And there is this just natural inversion that people, and the reason I'm just harping on about this is because I see it so much, where they just naturally want to reflect. They naturally want to go in. Instead of wanting to go out and do the activity, they want to go and read a few more books, listen to a couple more podcasts. They want to go and consume a lot more information. And yet there is this sort of cliche idea in the sort of self-help space where they say that you can't learn to surf by reading the book on how to surf. Right? You got to go and buy the board, and you got to get on the beach, and you got to get into the waves, and you got to try standing up, and you're going to fall down, and you're going to be like, damn, I should probably try again. And that's how you're going to learn. The other crazy thing that happens when people realize that they need to take action is that they start taking action, and when they do, they get a lot of information back, and they start to have this rapid learning and growth period because they are actually doing the thing firsthand, right? They are the primary source. They have their feet in the details. And because of that, they get a real understanding of what it's like, right? They might have had an abstraction as to what it was like, and now they really understand what it's like because they've done it. And then they can reflect on what's happened as they did it, and then they can go again. And that improvement cycle just goes like rapidly in like this sort of like this hockey stick curve, and they just go whoosh. And that is because they're using and looking at real information from their own personal experience. The information that you get from your personal experience is going to tell you a lot more than can be gained from books, from other people's conversations, from podcasts, from YouTube videos, from online courses. Your personal experience with it is going to give you the information that you need. Now, I do want to stress, books, online courses, going out and learning, amazing, right? You need that stuff. However, when it comes to this action phase, if you're going to choose one side, you choose the action first. And if you want to learn, you reflect on the action that you took, and then you take more action again. And that cycle, increasing that cycle, is how you get this rapid improvement. It's how you fall into the path. It's how that fiery nature comes into being. And you want to do more and more and more and more of that. One experience that I had in seeing this firsthand was I actually had a year. This was well before I knew what my career archetype was. My career archetype is a philosopher. And this was well before I knew what my path looked like. And I, for a year, would read books, and I would read for 4 hours every single day. And I just read and read and read and read. And during that process and that period of time, I thought, like, I'm getting really, really smart because I'm reading all these different books. And I definitely learned a lot. However, it wasn't until later on where I actually started walking the path, taking action, and there was actually a very defined moment where I had launched an education online course. It was the very, very first time I'd ever done that. And going through that process where I learned about my emotional ups and downs, I learned about how to bring something like that and package it and bring it together and actually bring it out into the world. I learned how to launch something. I learned so much within such a short space of time that I remember thinking like, oh, all that other stuff that I was doing, super inefficient, didn't really help me that much, and was kind of just a lot of noise. And another thing was that it was this avoidance because I wanted to sort of figure out how to do it perfectly, and by reading about all these different ideas and whatnot, I felt as though I'd be able to avoid the mistakes. And yet it was only by action and going at that rapid pace that I was truly able to learn properly, and then was able to avoid the mistakes, which are really in the beginning unavoidable through these things like just reading and not getting your hands dirty. And so if you are someone that is currently in this process of, hey, I kind of have a direction, I sort of know what it is that I want to be doing, and I just want to start to forge my way and bring it into the world, then you're in this action phase. And during that action phase, you really have to put that at the forefront. It's not a time for deep reflection. It's not a time for, sitting alone with yourself and really going over and mulling over your thoughts. Those times are super important. Those times are necessary to really get at the core and at the soul level of what it is that you're meant to be doing. However, in this phase, it's all about activity. It's all about going out there. It's all about overcoming what I call as a becoming barrier. And so there are different barriers along the way towards your calling that can hold you back. Some of these barriers include the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of being outcasted from the group. And when it comes to going out there are going to be these different barriers that are going to feel as though, hey, I can't do this because I actually fear failure. And you might want to revert back into yourself and say, well, maybe I should just go and really analyze this or go and journal about this extensively for the next month. And whilst that, and there are periods of your life where that might need to happen, and there might be these deeper phases where you do need to go and introspect and look at all these roots. Oftentimes, the best thing that happens when you're transitioning in this phase of your vocation isn't to do that. It's now to say, okay, that's what it is. So, for example, I fear failing, but now I need to take so much action in the direction of my soul's calling that I will eventually succeed. And you override it through non-thinking and acting, right? We want to get it out of the mind and into the body of activity, of expression, of movement forward. And if you are someone that is currently trying to understand which phase you're in, or maybe you don't know, or maybe you're trying to figure out what your path is, then you might want to check out the Unearthed membership, where I help and I show people how to choose the right career path with conviction by unearthing their very own career archetype in the space. We have other members, and they are unearthing their career archetype, and they're sharing their wins and basically going through their own personal unearthing. I also have a course in there, and that course goes for 8 weeks, and it shows students step by step how to do it. And we look at many different lenses in order to get the required self-knowledge together so that you can know what your calling is. Some of those lenses include astrology, Myers-Briggs, Jungian psychology, life mythology, some social feedback. And I walk people through that process and give them the clear steps in order to pursue their path. So if you're interested in that, check it out in the link below.